Welcome to the March 5th meeting of the Raleigh Appearance Commission. The Commission is charged with providing guidance, advice, and recommendations regarding the visual quality and aesthetic characteristics of the City of Raleigh. The members of the Commission are volunteers who are dedicated to the quality of design in Raleigh and represent a varied field of expertise. We will have staff review the staff report prior to the applicant's presentation and identify the administrative alternate findings that the applicant will need to address. For applicants presenting cases this afternoon, and especially because we have such a full docket, we ask that you keep your presentations to 10 minutes or less. Less is appreciated when you arrive at the podium. So come up, state your name and address for the record. Once you present your case, including all the required items, the Commission may ask you questions regarding your case, and then we'll table it for further discussion. Afterwards, we may ask you to come back up for further clarification. After the discussion, the Commission will set forth a recommendation to the Planning Director for a final determination. Thank you, and we will now start the agenda. Will AAD, this is for case AAD 5-20, 200 West Lane Street.
Just before we begin, Chair, I'd just like to let anyone know that if they were here for the AAD 420 case on Capitol Boulevard, that was advertised, but they withdrew, so they're not on the agenda. If anybody's here for that. Also, if you parked in the garage and we do have complimentary parking, just sign what meeting you're in, Appearance Commission, and they'll let you out of the garage.
And I actually need to ask to recuse myself from this case.
AAD 520 is seeking an alternate for Build 2 and fair transparency. The Build 2 is the area of the lot where a certain percentage of the principal building facade must be located, measured as a minimum and maximum setback range from the edge of the proposed or existing right-of-way, whichever is greater. The required percentage specifies the amount of the front building facade that must be located in the Build 2, measured based on the width of the building divided by the width of the site or lot. The applicant is proposing to develop a two-story building to house a delicatessen within a downtown mixed-use 12-story urban general frontage zone district. Since the site has an urban general frontage, the required build-to is 70% of the lot width between 0 feet and 20 feet of the primary street, which is West Lane Street. In addition, the corner build-to requirement within 30 feet of both streets applies to the corner condition on this property. As proposed, the building is located such that only 38.2% of the primary street lot width is satisfied. The applicant is proposing an amenity area along the corner of West Lane and North McDowell between the building and the intersection. The combined area of the building and amenity area occupies 70% of the build-to and the entirety of the corner build-to. The amenity area will have outdoor seating and tables, steps that serve as seating, and a seat wall that extends around the building's corner. Now moving on to transparency. The transparency requirements are intended to lend visual interest to street-facing building facades for both pedestrian and building occupants and to minimize blank wall areas. This is not applicable to residential uses. The applicant is proposing to construct a two-story building. I'm going to skip over that. I already read it. I apologize. As the proposed building is a general type within the urban frontage in a DX district, it is required to have 50% ground floor transparency on primary street facades. As proposed, the building meets 44.36% transparency on the east facade and 57.3% on the provided transparency falls between 3 feet and 8 feet. The angle of the building's corner makes it such that the transparency provided on the south facade contributes to the perceived transparency along the east facade. The placement of the amenity area and the seat wall provides activation and visual interest along both facades. The building's roof pitches and overhangs also contribute to the visual interest.
Thank you. Will the applicant please take the podium and present your case?
Good afternoon, all. My name is John Zellweger. I'm with Clearscapes, and I represent Loden Properties, who are the owner of 200 West Lane Street. This project for Loden is a very important one. Its aim is really to create a one-of-a-kind food experience adjacent to the new Longleaf Hotel, and obviously to contribute to the experience of those guests attending and staying at that hotel. However, they also understand the opportunity here to contribute to Raleigh as a whole, and they know that the success of any establishment here will rely on its architecture to draw attention and draw interest to the establishment. So our aim was to address some of the challenges with the site, which are twofold. Topographically and geometrically, the site has some challenges. And what we have done is attempt to solve that with the building's geometry, keeping it on the high part and the flat part of the site, which is here. The topography slopes down and away this way. Actually, let me back up for 1 second. Is everybody familiar with the location of the site? Because it does have a huge impact on the feel for this. As the end of the one-way couple into town and going on to Capitol Boulevard, this is the last block before you leave the downtown core. And so the speed and the rate of speed of the traffic is picking up. Folks are more interested in leaving town than staying in town, but this is also a very important edge. And so this building has a huge opportunity for visibility for anybody stopping at that light or going through it. Because of the topography, we wanted, as I said, we wanted to locate the building on the most practical and geometrically simple portion of the site. So essentially, we have a traditional parcel here, and we have the reshape. There was a parcel here, of course. I think that makes some sense. The idea being that we're actually relating to the primary street more than the secondary street, which is McDowell. We're trying to reinforce the historic relationship to the city core. The building itself is actually a one-story building. I know that Lee mentioned it being a two-story building. That's okay. But we are pursuing with the Board of Adjustment an acceptance for a one-story structure there, and that's happening next week. It's about a 2,500 square foot building. And as I said, it's located on the flattest portion of the site, with the balance of the site being the outdoor amenity area here. That area is comprised of a dining space, stairs for access from the corner, as well as robust landscaping, which includes a rain garden to address the stormwater elements related to the site. We've also shifted the building towards the street. The existing building there, which is now demolished, previously sat approximately here, as I've drawn on the screen here. And so we're trying to, again, reinforce and improve the urban condition here by bringing the building towards the site, or towards the street. Also, what's important to our ownership is the amount of transparency, not only from the UDO standpoint, but also from an experiential standpoint. We have glass almost all around the entire front perimeter of the building, not only for visibility inward to see the activation of the space and create interest from the outside, but also for the guests who are going to be dining on the inside. Hopefully this is clear. There is a whole series of seats that line that interior of the glass. So this isn't just about seeing in, but it's also about being able to be at the glass, looking out, seeing the traffic, enjoying the view. So I think Lee pointed out that from a transparency standpoint, we have about 44% on the McDowell Street. I'm not sure if you said what we have on the Lane Street side. It is actually an overage. We are in excess of, I think it's 60% at this point from our calculations. And because we have reoriented that front facade to address the corner, we feel that we have sort of created an appropriate balance, given that the interior programming is making it a challenge for us to actually place that glass on the east facade. Further, the more north you go, the less important that glass becomes, because grade is dropping and there's nothing really that one can see, because you are about 5 to 7 feet below the finished floor of the building as you walk along that sidewalk. From a build-to standpoint, we obviously had to incorporate the amenity area, and we are utilizing that to establish the frontage requirements. We think that this is extremely appropriate with the building setback, again, for the purposes of acoustics against the traffic, but also it's just fun to sit out there on the side of the street and watch cars go by and enjoy the orientation of both south, east, and west there. I think that's it in a nutshell. I won't go on. I'll try to field the questions that you might have.
Are there any questions before we take it to table?
How tall is that 7B retaining wall?
Let's see.
The retaining wall facing,
So,
it's the one facing McDowell.
well, because the grade is dropping along here, you're talking about 7B right there,
Yeah.
2 to 3 feet max. That's the place where all the grades are starting to tie together. We are about 2 to 3 feet lower here than we are from the building footprint, from the finished floor, which is why we have the steps. But from a perception standpoint, we have graded the property up as much as possible to those steps to minimize that wall itself.
And is there a fence planned on top of that line where the retaining wall is?
At this time, we do not believe we require one. And the only reason we would implement one would be for guardrail purposes to meet building code. We're trying to use grade and try to ease that as much as possible to eliminate any railings that would normally be necessary.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. We'll call back
Thanks.
if there's other questions.
Appreciate it.
All right, let's get into the build to.
Jamie, the public.
Oh, any comments from the public with regards to this case, please? Thank you. Substantial amenity area brings them up to 70%. They've mentioned tables and dining space, retaining walls, things of that nature. Any thoughts on this initially?
My commentary is that part of our charge is to be sure that we were interpreting the black and white, the UDO, to create great places, and I think they did an awesome job. I think they did on both asks. I think they did a great job.
Completely agree.
Yeah. Meaningful amenity at the corner draws the eye. I think it's great.
Inviting and useful. That's right. Okay. Any other comments from the commission?
I will just say that it's nice to see some of Raleigh's new buildings actually care about architecture for once.
That's good. Second item with this case is transparency. The mention of exceeding the one side 60% and then close on the 44%. And this goes back to what you were just saying by way of engagement. You know, the indoor, outdoor, it's not just a window. It's not to look in, it's also to look out. I think it was well planned.
Yeah, I feel logistically, I mean, they're there. It's just a code thing. Yeah, I think it's great. I couldn't think of anything I'd rather see. So I think they did a great job.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and review. Anyone have a motion for build two? Well, let's substantiate this as well.
Policy LU 2.1.
LU 5.1.
Policy UD 2.1. Okay.
I would say 4.5 as well,
Okay.
connectivity.
Say 2.7.
Corey, what did you say? 2.7?
Yeah, did we say 2.7?
Not yet. Okay, with that in mind, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Transparency. Please comment any item for substantiation of this.
UD 1.2.
Policy DT 7.5.
Policy UD 2.1.
And a motion on this particular item, transparency.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
All right, so this is case AAD 6-20 for 518 West Cabarrus Street.
Thank you. The applicant is requesting administrative alternates for UDO sections 1.5.6 build to, 1.5.8 pedestrian access, and 1.5.9 transparency. In terms of the build to, this site is 6.82 acres. It's a mixed-use development proposed. The zoning is industrial mixed-use, 7 stories, urban limited. And as you see by the thing, 3 of the sides are bounded by streets. And to the north, the railroad. 2 mixed-use buildings are proposed on the eastern portion, containing retail on the ground floor and office above. And on the western portion, a residential building with retail on the ground floor. Since the site has urban limited frontage, the build to is 50% of the lot width, located between 0 and 20 feet from the primary street, and 25% on the side street. For this development, the primary streets are Cabarrus and DuPont Circle. In terms of West Cabarrus and the western portion of the site, the residential mixed-use building is located completely out of the 0 to 20 foot build to. They have, I think, some challenges, but yet they provide a amenity area completely across that portion, save for what they're calling a gas farm, some gas equipment, natural gas equipment that it's there in the corner of DuPont and West Cabarrus. They also have a build-to issue at the corner of Cabarrus and West Street for the office buildings. They do not meet the corner build-to requirement that requires a building within 30 feet, kind of measured as a 30-foot, I guess, square from that corner. But in lieu of that, they're providing an amenity area. I think in the plans it speaks to that, but they might have some more details as to what the composition of that amenity area is. So that's, in terms of the build-to, those are the requirements there. So they're trying to seek an alternate for. And with that, especially on the western portion, the amenity area would take over 50% of that lot width. So in terms of the pedestrian access, this is an urban limited frontage. The requirement in the code is that there are primary street facing entrances at a maximum spacing of 75 feet along primary streets. In this case, West Cabarrus Street. On the office portion, office building, the southern face that borders Cabarrus Street does not have a pedestrian access on that. It's not reflected in the what was put out in the agenda, but in front of you, and the applicant will describe in more detail what they're trying to do in lieu of that. And then in terms of transparency, the applicant, since this is a mixed-use building, or mixed-use buildings in an IX district, each building is required to provide 50% ground floor transparency fronting public streets. In addition to that, 50% of the required transparency must be located between 3 and 8 feet. And then upper floors are required at 20% transparency. I think this is important to note, and I've spoken to the chair and the applicants, that recently, late November, there was a text change to the what we really thought of cleaning up some things with the UDO, but the one for transparency a little further, more of a structural change in how we measure transparency on the ground floor. In the past, basically, you take a line from the sidewalk or the ground level and measure 12 feet up and go straight up, no matter what floor it was. But we have since revised that to be more of what you saw in the Hillside development standards, to kind of look at a stepped or terraced approach. So that's measured from floor elevation, and it could be kind of staggered as it goes up a hill. So the applicant is going to talk a little bit about that. They're kind of caught in that, and I think this being one of the first projects we've seen measuring this, we're a little new at measuring it. So the applicants can speak a little bit more about that. So in terms of the requirements, they would require to meet on Cabarrus Street, Southwest Street. They've since, with their revised plans, they think they can meet that transparency on West Street and Cabarrus Street with their office portions. Though, and I did speak to the applicant about this, there might be a calculation on the southwest side where the percentage between 3 and 8 feet is not quite there at 50%. I think it's about 48 if my math is right. So I've spoken to the applicant about this. I think he can address that. So there might need to be a alternate sought for that. There is an issue with the residential building, both on DuPont Circle and Cabarrus Street. I think initially they had looked at providing the calculations without counting that area behind that gas farm. So Development Services has mentioned that it needs to be the whole of the elevation on the first floor. So they would require alternate on both those building facades. I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant is here as well, and applicant does request that he can kind of provide the whole presentation and take questions after.
Okay. All right. Anybody got questions for Carter?
I need to recuse myself from this one.
Okay. All right. Please step forward. Please try to keep your presentation to 10 minutes.
Yes, we have a number of visuals. I'll try to go through them very quickly, give you an overview. We also have a large team here. My name is Jay Smith. I'm with Duda Architects. We're the architects for the office buildings on the project. We have Klein Design here with us also, who will speak a little bit to the residential portion of the project. And we have both McAdams and Stewart, our civil and landscape architects, that tie the whole project together. Make sure I know how to advance the slides here.
Just the arrow button.
Arrows, that's easy. Wanted to make sure that everybody understood where we were on the project. I think this is an important project for us in an area that's seeing a lot of development. There's a lot of connectivity discussions that are happening along West Street. I wanted to make sure that everybody knew we were at the corner of West and West Cabarrus, and we're also bounded by DuPont Circle. You can see some of the context that we're relating to and trying to create ties to in terms of the urban fabric with Union Station and the plaza there, along with CAM, some of the warehouse type structures that exist around the site, and the Dillon project. This was an interesting diagram for us in terms of connecting across the city. Again, that urban fabric to us and understanding our project in the greater context of the city is really important. Below the diagrams where you see what we're calling an urban connector from Devereux Meadows down to Dix Hill, you can see our site along that diagram. And below that you can see the partie diagram for how we're treating the corner of West and Cabarrus. So we thought about this as a block. We split the block, and we thought about the corner being the most important civic space of the project, facing the corner of West and Cabarrus. You can see that in a diagram. So one of the things that was attempted at both Union Station and the Dillon was to create a space off of West Street for people to enter and gather. And then as you move down, we know that there will be a planned connection. We're coordinating that with the city underneath the railroad tracks. And so we're trying to create something similar with a civic space at the corner. Our client, Kane, also has a development in design across the street from us and is also doing something similar along West Street. You can see the project in its entirety. So 2 office buildings facing the corner of West and Cabarrus. The residential portion of the project fronts Cabarrus Street. Parking is on the back side facing really the railroad track and the right-of-way. Entrance from that is also along DuPont. You can see a couple of character images and a couple of renderings for the project. You'll see those in more detail. You can see here the amount of residential units and the parking that's being provided by the project. You can see here in this slide the site conditions as they are, as Clancy and Thay's construction office and some other storage facilities that front on the railroad side of the project. This is the corner of West and Cabarrus, so you can start to get a sense for some of the topography here. This is an image on looking back up Cabarrus Street. And then you can see on the right-hand side the rendering of the corner of our project and our civic space. So West Street sloping back to the railroad and Cabarrus sloping down further and away from downtown. One of the things we've tried to do on the project is address what we think is important to the character of the neighborhood. They're looking at precedent examples of warehouse projects. We want to create a new and modern structure, but we think there's a lot to be gained from this type of building to give back to the city something new. You can see that this is a elevation of the facade, the typical facade of our office project, in which we've tried to take cues from the warehouse type building, creating a masonry structure with large open windows on all levels. This is our office level and above, and we have 6 stories for the office and a 7th story at the top. This building is pretty unique. It will be the first or one of the first mass timber buildings in this region, and I think for that reason it's going to bring an incredible amount of interest and character. So that is something that we see as a real advantage for the site and the city. You can see here the challenges we're facing for slopes. So this is our elevation at the corner of West and Cabarrus. You can see we slope down along West Street almost 20 feet toward the railroad track. This will be where the underpass is created to continue on to Union Plaza and Union Station. And then you can see the slope is slightly more gradual, and we have a longer stretch along West Cabarrus down to the corner here. It's about 12 feet. You can see that in section as well. And you can see on the backside of the site we slope further down. This is the low point on the site of the backside where the railroad is, and you can kind of see in section the condition of the railroad track related to the levels of our office buildings. Ground floor of the project, you can see our civic space at the corner, and then you can see that these 2 areas of the building are actually non-occupied, unbuilt areas at the lowest level of the building, which really doesn't reach its ground level until you get down into this portion of the site. We've tried to put all of our service and mechanical equipment on the backside of the site facing away from the 2 public streets. You can see that we have office above with an idea for entryways around the plaza spaces and the potential for creative office or some other type of retail use to activate the street edge. It's a roof plan. And then you can see in more detail the Civic Plaza space. You can see that we're trying to provide multiple ways into the Civic Plaza, so there'll be a few steps down into that level plaza, which is at grade with the level 2 of the office building. You can see we have a on-grade accessible way into the project from West Street on this side of the site, and I'll tell you a little bit more about a way and path in along West Cabarrus. You can also see the character of the building in terms of what I try to describe with the materiality and the rhythm of the facade. On the public plaza, we try to provide the greatest amount of transparency we could to activate that space and use that as a civic marker. So I won't read all of this. We've tried to provide these sections that state the intent of the administrative alternates we're discussing today and our findings. I think you have that packet. This one deals specifically with the build to. We have 2 locations that we're addressing. One is the civic space at the corner, which I've described. The other is along West Cabarrus in front of the residential component of the project. So the little bit more detail here, I'll describe this one first, and you've already seen a lot of that. We're trying to provide a civic plaza there that addresses the street and becomes a gateway as part of the experience. It's about 45 feet setback, so it's beyond what the UDO requests, but we're trying to, both with the design intent of the building and the design intent of the plaza, to give something back there to the city that's unique. And then for the residential portion of the project, there are some infrastructure constraints here. We're collecting a lot of water from the city, from downtown, redirecting that water through and around the site. There's a culvert that requires some setbacks at the edge of the residential space here. What we've tried to do there is take advantage of the setback and create a amenity zone completely in front of the residential entry here. So you can see that in the rendering below. This is a view right here at the corner. So down the sidewalk here with a covered area, and then along the level of residential and entryways here toward an opening into a courtyard. You can see this is the residential project looking back into the courtyard and back to the corner I just described. So there is access up and to that level from the street as it continues to drop. You can see the character of the residential components here and its relationship to the office building facade as you go up West Cabarrus. This is another view of that corner that shows you the entirety of the residential project. This is looking down West Cabarrus Street and into the private drive. And this is looking across the street. So our office buildings are here, two components of the residential. The area where I described the culvert runs below and the setback is created, and an amenity level is created across this area of the residential project. The gas farm that was mentioned is over in this corner of the project. Pedestrian access. One of the things we've tried to do with the office building related to the pedestrian access, because the slope is across the site and the sidewalk is not contiguous with the ground, the upper level of the office building as it meets the Civic Plaza, we have not provided doorways into the office building at the interval that the UDO lays out. But what we've tried to do here is create a rhythm of opportunities for pedestrians to move along the sidewalk and have areas of respite or areas of gathering. We're using bench elements and lighting elements along with some landscape that we're using to accommodate drainage and grade on that edge of the office building to enhance the look and feel of this edge of the office building. And again, we're trying to do that at an interval which replicates what the UDO would require for doors. There's a clear access in from this side of the project to the entryway of the plaza. Carter described our methods for transparency. This lays out the Hillside Method. It's something that we have done for the first time here. The initial calculations were done in the traditional method, and the new calculations were done with the Hillside text change. So on West Street, you can see the railroad here. For this portion of the site, we looked at option B of the Hillside development text. That states measure transparency from the finished ground floor instead of the sidewalk. This ground floor could be staggered on a steeply sloped site. So along West Street, we staggered that in this manner. So you can see the design elevation here. We staggered it along this area. We also increased our windows, so we made design changes to try to accommodate a greater transparency, and we believe that we're meeting the 50% of transparency. Carter called out, I think, this area in particular as maybe being just under 50%. Our intent was to hit 50%, and we think that we can do that. Along Cabarrus Street, we took the transparency along this level of the building from the Civic Plaza all the way down the elevation at the ground level starting from this point, and we believe we meet the 50% transparency. I think the only thing I'd add before handing it over to Brian to explain the transparency for the residential aspect is we believe that the building meets the intent of visual interests along the street in all its components. I'm sorry, this
So
is
we've already
the
done-
last office building. So you can see some of the changes that we've made here, expanding the window, creating new windows to meet the transparency.
So we're past our 10-minute time, so whatever needs to be added, add it quickly, please.
I will do 2 very quick minutes. I got 6 slides. Brian Johnson, Klein Design, architect for the residential.
Thank you.
Just want to quickly orient you to the residential building, just so I don't think we've looked at it quite detail yet. Cabarrus on the south, DuPont on the west. Most of our back-of-house services kind of line the parking deck on either side. We have commercial space fronting DuPont, and then again, back-of-house trash, electrical vault adjacent to the gas farm, which we'll look at 3-dimensionally here. Cabarrus elevation and the last round of transparency calculations with staff, we've kind of gone back and forth. Previously, we had excluded some areas that they now want to see, and we had included areas that they want to exclude. So what you see before you is an updated version of that. Cabarrus Street, if we do not include the gas farm, we are actually exceeding the 50% transparency requirement. If we include it, it does drop us below, I think, down to 45%. I have a slide which will show you why that's relevant in a minute. However, on DuPont elevation actually is kind of working in reverse for us. We are falling short of the transparency requirement. As you saw from the plan, a lot of our back-of-house functions, trash collection, electrical, is located on that, so that while we have transparency in some of those locations, obviously others are undesirable to have. Also, the openings that we have into the courtyard that are not counted towards that transparency. And then if we go to... So this would be a DuPont elevation. So what we've tried to do is basically, we've got what we affectionately refer to as the platform, which we're doing on Cabarrus, on DuPont, trying to activate the spaces that are active as much as possible. The opening into the courtyard, which is a public courtyard. So all these commercial spaces are front and back loaded, so the public has the opportunity to engage on both sides of that. Looking up DuPont towards the railroad tracks. And then along Cabarrus, so you can see the gas farm is existing. It's a main hub for the gas. The gas line serves most of South Raleigh, so shutting it down, moving it is really not an option. So the gas farm has to stay. I guess the point of this graphic is that, we are going to screen it in some capacity. With it remaining there, most of that transparency that's included in those 2 legs that we previously did not include really isn't going to be visible. So I don't know that it really helps us meet the intent, but just for your information, that's it.
Right. You did great, thanks. All right, does anybody have any questions for the design team? All right, we'll table it. Oh, is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak about this case? Okay, thanks. All right, a lot of information. Do we want to start with Build 2? I think it's a lot more straightforward maybe than some of the other ones. I think the use of amenity areas in both locations, both in front of the residential and at the corner along West and Cabarrus, pretty clearly meet the kind of findings and the intent. Does everybody agree? Okay. All right. All right, would you like to help me substantiate that, please? I want to say policy LU 5.1, reinforcing the urban pattern. Policy UD 2.7, public open space.
LU 2.1, placemaking.
Sorry.
UD 4.1.
Okay.
gathering spaces.
All right. So do we agree that the approved alternate does not substantially negatively alter the character-defining street wall or establish a build-to pattern that is not harmonious with the existing built context? I think we're good. Okay. And the change in percentage of building that occupies the build-to area or increased setback does not negatively impact pedestrian access, comfort, or safety. And I think it
Correct.
enhances it.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay. And then site area that would have otherwise been occupied by buildings is converted to an outdoor amenity area, which it clearly is. All right. So with that, do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So let's dig into pedestrian access. So this one, just for everybody's reference, I'm gonna try to find the page. Ultimately, I think it's this office building along Cabarrus that just doesn't have any pedestrian entrances. And how do we feel as a commission about that? I'll try to also quickly flip to the elevation of that. Lots of pages.
Is it the office building we're working for?
Yes, it's that front corner office building. Oh, it's along the side. All right. I think I'm almost there. You got it, Chad? Is it this one? All right, so it looks like this, just because we get so much.
Oh, yeah, the very back.
Okay, we'll share. All right, so, well, can I borrow your packet? All right, so the intent, just to remind everybody of pedestrian access, is that the street-facing entrance regulations are intended to concentrate pedestrian activity along the street edge and provide an easily identifiable, and conveniently located entrances for residents, visitors, and patrons accessing a building as pedestrians from the street. And access points should be located or identified in a manner visible to pedestrians from the street via a direct path. I mean, I think the case could certainly be made that they're making this grand move at the corner with a plaza space, and I think that is a fantastic way to denote entry. You know, perhaps really, I think the question is that enough to overcome lack of pedestrian access points along the rest of it? We know at the back end of it also, there is, you know, the entrance to the courtyard element, the private drive kind of linking you through to the interior of the site.
I guess it's determining if there's still enough activity or visual transparency there. It does seem like there are a lot of windows, but
And at least in the rendering, it appears to be a pretty attractive, you know, building elevation itself, so.
And the mention of lighting and bench spaces throughout that area as well.
Do we want to try to work through the findings and see if we see any snags as we go? Is that enough? Okay. All right. So the approved alternate meets the intent of street-facing entrance regulations. I mean, I think the plaza certainly is a grand gesture towards that.
An offset for sure. We know why there's not a pedestrian entrance there.
You want to ask?
It's the grade.
Grade.
It's a grade.
Yeah.
Confirm that grade is the reason for no pedestrian access on that side. That's correct. Thank you. Well, I mean, with that in mind, pushing them forward.
I think great landscape. So my comment to Brandy is, I think, obviously we talked to you guys about this on 300, but you did a great job with the pedestrian space, and yeah, you don't have access to that one point of that one facade of the office, but that's something that great landscape architecture can't overcome and pull you along. So it may not be about the entry of the building, but maybe about the experience. And I think just kind of looking at it like that achieves a equally, I think, acceptable outcome as just trying to enter the building, in my opinion.
I'd also add that, you know, if you look at the elevation along the entire stretch of Camelot, it's very broken up, so it's not one big long facade. So that makes me feel, you know, in the private drive, that didn't have to be there. So I think there's other ways that sort of that broken character is being sort of achieved.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with it.
I think that's a good point, and I think the pedestrian activity along the front of the residential building with that plaza space will really help to pull people between those two kind of plaza spaces. So I think it'll help overcome it as long as what Chad said.
Yeah, I don't think we need to be prescriptive, but we trust the design team.
That's
I think, for me, I think as we develop more and more, we're going to have more situations where we have odd blocks. And odd blocks don't fit the code, but sometimes offer the best opportunities to do great design. You just have to outthink them. And I think if you can use the landscape architecture as kind of that wayfinding into the site, I think that's a win-win.
Agreed. I feel pretty good about it just from the standpoint that it in proportion to the entire development, is a pretty small stretch. Yeah, and the grade is what it is, so.
Yeah.
All right.
Substantiate.
So let's substantiate that. I mean, it's really similar to the last ones we pulled, policy LU 5.1, reinforcing the urban pattern. LU 5.1.
I'd say LU 2.5. Kind of in an opposite way. It makes you walk, but it's in a nice landscape area.
And I think even LU 2.1 placemaking, because I think the existence of these plaza spaces are, you know, nice places to inhabit, and I think they'll be very good for the city in general. All right. The pedestrian access point is easily identifiable by pedestrians, customers, and visitors.
The plaza.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Recessed or projecting entries or building elements have been incorporated into the design of the building to enhance visibility along the street-facing entrance. You can't get much more recessed than the plaza, so I think we got it. And the pedestrian route from the street and bus stop and other modes of public transportation to the entrance is safe, convenient, and direct.
It is.
All right. So do I hear a motion for this?
Motion to approve?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, let's move on to the last. So transparency. Here we go again. Put them all in place. So really, we're only looking, help me out here.
West Street.
Is it this one? So it's, Carter, can you help us out and make sure we're focusing this? I think it is.
Sure,
the
it seems from the
Southwest
applicant, they can
Street.
correct me, that they can accomplish it on Southwest Street and on
Southwest
West
Street,
Cabarrus
okay.
Street for the office buildings. It's the residential building
Okay.
to the west where
Okay.
both DuPont and Cabarrus Street.
Okay, perfect. So DuPont and Cabarrus, you said? Okay. Yeah. So that's this, right? Is that this elevation then? Yeah, so that's it.
That's the one.
And it's.
And the
so-
service on the garage, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think, again, the grand gesture of the plaza space that is in front of the entire thing, plus the amount of transparency that the building offers to that space, sufficiently activates your pedestrian experience. I don't think having windows behind a gas farm is going to
And-
enhance a
And to the
pedestrian
comment here, and what we're
experience.
looking at on the screen too, if there's that much hedging or some type of screening, you won't know what's behind it regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah, my thing is like, do one or two things great. And if we meet it trivial around the project, we're kind of undoing the point of it, so.
Yeah, and I think just the vast majority of your experience of that space, you're not gonna notice this
You
thing on
won't
the
stay in that
corner.
area.
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
You speaking of Cabarrus or DuPont or both?
I'm speaking of Cabarrus.
Cabarrus is where the gas field is.
Right.
Let's do one.
as the blocks get more and more complex, we got to be mindful that there's always going to be a back to a building and how they handle that.
And that's the space.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a sort of center section of the elevation that looks like it has very appropriate attention paid to it. What percentage short are we? I know it's written down, but are we only 5% short?
Less than 5%.
According to reviewing it, on Cabarrus Street, looks like the total, they're at 45%, and the 3 to 8, they're at 43%.
So what
it's
about
close on the Cabarrus,
So-
DuPont Circle, it's,
Yeah.
total is 34%, and 3 to 8 is 40%.
Inclusive of the gas farm. Inclusive. of the gas
Including, yeah, because we've been very clear from Development Services that they need to count the whole,
So we are how much short? 8%?
you have to ask me to do math, please don't.
I'm sorry, Carter. Okay.
Well, and then also
So
the
the point
common-
is they're not grossly
No, and
short.
and the open air plaza space, we can't count that because it's not part of the building structure. That is open space as well.
And again, the intent of transparency is to lend visual interest and, activation of the street experience for pedestrians. And while that is a whole, it certainly complements the pedestrian experience along the
Creates the
street.
experience, yeah.
So
I mean, if the gas farm wasn't there, they'd
it
be
would be a
fine.
different,
Be fine.
It would be a different conversation. Okay. All right. So let me flip pages. So the approved alternate meets the intent of transparency requirements. It sounds like we are in agreement that it does. The approved alternate conforms with the comprehensive plan and adopted city plans. Help me substantiate, please. Policy UD 1.3, creating attractive facades. UD 2.3, activating the street. 3.4.
Policy DT 7.12, plaza perimeter uses.
All right. And finally, the street-facing building facade utilizes other architectural treatments to create visual interest to offset the reduction in transparency. And I think we feel like all of this transparency and activity around it offsets it. So with that, do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
All in favor? Aye.
I'd like to commend you guys for consideration of placement of your back of house. Thank you very much. We've seen some of the people with their dumpsters right in your lap. Here's a dumpster, and don't walk too fast, because we're gonna bump into you. It's gonna be a good looking building. It's gonna be a real good looking building.
Let me know when you're ready, Lee.
You do.
All right. We're at case AAD 7-20 for 4200 Pearl Road. Will the applicant please, or actually Lee, please introduce it first?
Sure. So this is a build-to request for a development of townhomes in an R10 conditional use zone district. Townhomes are required to meet 70% of the build-to along primary streets between 10 feet and 55 feet. So as proposed, the townhomes fronting on Queen Purette Street occupy 68.7% of the build-to. The townhomes along the western side of Lord Fogelman Way only meet 55.8% of the street's build-to, and the townhomes on the corner, as the townhomes on the corner there are not considered part of the build-to because their primary entrances don't front along that primary street, though they do occupy that build-to space. And then the rest of the block face along the eastern portion of Lord Fogelman Way is also being held to build-to, and that currently has no buildings within that build-to region, even though, once again, those buildings on the corner do occupy a portion of it. So the applicant is proposing an amenity area along Lord Fogelman Way between the street and the corner lot line, bringing the combined building and amenity area to 88.2%, and the southern and to the south of the townhouses on Queen Pierrette Street, bringing that build to 87%, that would have otherwise been occupied by building. There are also additional amenity areas along the rest of the block facade along Lord Fogelman Way, which it's not printed here, but it occupies 79% of the build too. I apologize for that.
All right.
Peter Connaughton, Jones Connaughton Engineering, engineer for Camelot Development. This is Camelot Village Phase 3, 8.5 acres roughly, with 55 townhomes proposed. We are requesting a administrative alternate for Build 2 along 3 block faces. This area here is along Queen Pierrette Street. We are constrained by a Duke Power easement along that line, and there's not enough lot depth in the building to site another unit along that street front to make up for the build to. Moving down along Lord Fogelman, I know this is a smaller view. Let's see if I got another one. Excuse me. Down Lord Fogelman, this area here, just to give you a dimension, that's roughly about 99 feet, but here you're more like around 78 feet. There's not enough lot depth to meet set the building within the setbacks that are required by the City of Raleigh. That is why that building has been oriented toward Little Fellow Lane. And lastly, I'll go back up to the bigger view. This area here on the east side of along Lord Fogelman, east of Little Fellow Lane, is all amenity area, what is shown in green. Again, this lot depth in this area here is roughly about 78 feet, just not enough depth to site a building where it would orient facing Lord Fogelman Way. So again, that is why this building here is oriented towards Little Fellow Lane. We do propose a dog park in this area. This is kind of give you a little aerial view. There's roughly all this treescape here. We have tree conservation area here, as well as a dog park. And that dog park is going to be accessed by sidewalk, and we'll have a bench for residents to utilize that area. And basically, those are the constraints that we have in terms of build to. So be happy to answer any questions.
Can I ask, and this will have no bearing on what we discuss after this, but I mean, it seems to me a shame that we're having to create this Little Fellow Way little road and orient buildings that way. I mean, it takes away from, the Lord Fogelman Way. I'm probably saying that wrong, but I mean, I just feel like it would be a much nicer thing if we didn't have to turn them. So is there a reason you're not pursuing a variance on that for the lot depth?
Basically, it was required by transportation to provide a street stub.
Okay, so it wouldn't matter. Yeah.
It wouldn't matter, right?
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. Okay. We'll call you up if we have questions. Thank you. All right. So how does everybody feel about this one?
Carter, can I just ask a point of clarification on some of these amenity areas? Don't amenity areas have to be 10 feet in all directions?
They would need to be 10 feet in dimension, yes.
Some of these look like they're just like narrow strips.
I think that's something I thought the applicant was going to kind of address.
Okay.
That's
please
only for required amenity areas.
I was trying to be quick, so.
It's okay. You did great. Thank you.
But anyway, all amenity areas are a minimum of 10 feet. The most narrow one is here. That is a 10-foot strip.
It's 10 feet?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's all I needed.
Thank you.
Sure.
All
All right, I don't know how you guys feel about,
Madam Chair, I think we need to public.
oh, yes. Are there folks from the public who would like to comment on this? All right. Please come
Come on up.
forward, state your name and address, and then ask away.
Okay, name is Christy Payne, address is 4504 Lord Mario Court, so it's still the same community, but just a little bit further away. Our question mainly is, our concern is Pearl Road, where the entrance is coming into this little section. If you look up higher, like north on this map, you can see the curve is like really sharp. The more that they're building and more people are moving in, it's getting really dangerous. The speed limit is 35, and we just don't, we're like trying to figure out, what do we need to do, as I'm the HOA president, so everybody comes to me. What do we need to do to see if maybe we could get like the speed limit changed to 25, or maybe get those little curvy road signs put in, or maybe even some little rails or something, because it's like ditches. So whenever somebody's flying around, you're trying to get off and it's a ditch. And so my parents actually came over and almost went in the ditch, and they were like, have you seen that corner? And I'm like, I don't even go out that way. I avoid that way at all possible. So I guess from learning, being at CAC meetings, they said that builders sometimes can put money towards the road or something. If I don't know if I'm understanding that correctly, but I don't know if maybe that's something they would have to do or something that we would have to do.
I'm going to let Carter answer.
Sure, these are great questions for our transportation operations folks. The discussion today is very focused on the build to in there. But if I can we can get your information,
Yeah.
we can forward that to our transportation operations folks and have them get back with you about those questions.
Yeah, okay, sounds good.
If you,
Do you want me to write it down?
Yeah.
I think her question is a good one because it almost supports his ask and his request that, you know, the visibility, if it was a building clear to the corner, would even be harder to see your sight lines and triangles. So
So an amenity area that opens it up
if
for
it
the
was
view is
if it was a more
probably
open amenity.
helpful for sure, in at least that corner. Yeah. All right, come forward, state your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Blanche Hubbard, and I live at 4753 Princess Anna Murray Lane, Raleigh. And I stay right at where the condos will be built. So how far will the condos will be built behind me? I want to know. And will they be a fence behind me? And you say there would be a dog park. I don't need no dog park behind me in the area. We don't need no dog park. If anything, we need a park for the kids. We have enough dog nests in our neighborhood already. So a dog park would be no good for us. So I know that, and on our street, in our neighborhood, no, a dog park would not be good. And for the condos, I'm not down for no condos. No. For me, no. I'm not really, that's a negative for me. Are you gonna put a fence up for the house on the backside? We have a row of houses. Are you gonna put a fence up or something for all these houses on the backside?
So can
That's
somebody,
what we want to know.
Can you answer that question just in general, like if there's going to be any kind of fence between existing properties and the new development?
There's no plan to, no. I mean, the only thing I'm going to point out is this parcel here
Yes.
is a vacant parcel that's wooded. That is between our development and where I believe this is Princess Anna,
Okay.
right here.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a buffer there based on
Yes.
a vacant lot.
So the only parcel that would not benefit from that is the large one on the corner.
This one here?
No, other
Oh,
end.
this side.
The big one there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is true.
okay.
But again, my understanding, that is a vacant parcel as well.
Yeah,
It's
and
not a
then-
residential parcel.
Clarification only?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And can you tell me what price would the houses start out with?
I can meet with you outside afterwards.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tiffany Williams. I live at 4733 Princess Anna Marie Lane. I have been in the back of this area where they're proposing these townhomes to go, and he states there's a buffer. If you could come and stand in my back door, you could see through that buffer. So before whoever purchased this land purchased it, there were 3 mobile homes back there. I don't have small children anymore, but I now have a grandchild. Our babies in this neighborhood, I watch for my neighbors' kids more than anything. The traffic in our area is already horrible. And I know that you guys probably, I won't say that you don't care, but I don't think there's a lot of anything that any of us can say or do when people with money come in and say this is what they're going to do. I think these meetings are nice, but I think ultimately the decision is already made. But there should be some consideration for us, the people who live there. We're already flanked by these neighborhoods where there's crime now starting to come around. My concern as a single lady who may from time to time have my grandchild with this so-called buffer area that my kids can walk right through and go to the Dollar General on Rock Quarry Road, that's kind of a joke for me. Again, progress is good, you can't stop it, but I would like to see the builders really do something meaningful, so to speak, for our homes, because this stuff is going to affect the value of our homes. The traffic, as the HOA president already said, is horrible. I walk, I run in this area where they're talking about this curve, and people already come through here going horribly fast. It's like there's no speed limit sign posted, and there clearly are.
Sure.
So I worry about our safety, one, because you never know who you live amongst. And in our neighborhood, we kind of know everybody. Everybody knows everybody. We look out for everybody. But now you're going to bring in more people, more traffic, and I hope that they're going to do something about that. That is just my piece of it.
Yeah, and to address your comments, I think they're all very valid, and I'm glad the representative of the builder is here to hear them. What we're charged to do as a commission is really look at how if they're not meeting specifics of the code, how they could hopefully leave it better than even what the code would require. So it does limit us. We have a very narrow bandwidth to talk about, but we can, in this particular case, talk about the amenity area where the dog park is shown and where the tree conservation area. There's a zone there that would directly affect you guys, that we could ask that they consider plantings and things that create a better visual buffer. So we hear you, and we will request some of the things that could hopefully improve your experience with this neighborhood.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
All right. Any others from the public? All right, so we'll table it and start the discussion. All right. All right. Somebody wants to go first. I think I want to segment the site and work plan west to east, if that's okay, left to right. I think the grouping of townhomes that fronts Queen Pierrette Drive, the amenity areas that are being proposed make a lot of sense, especially since he can't put another unit in there. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Do we need to see what's planned for that area? Is there a strong enough street edge? How do we feel about that?
Well, in review prior to this case, I was curious, is it just grass? I'd like to know what it's going to be, what will consist in that space. Benches, hardscape of any kind, upright landscaping, or is it just going to be lower level plantings? And we can table that and ask later, but.
Or, I mean, we might just need.
You want to know now?
No. We might just need them to come back with something.
Okay,
as
I'm fine with
opposed
that
to-
too. I think so,
That'd
yeah.
be good.
So let me ask that question. With the public comment that we've heard and with the lack of information that we have on what's going in the amenity areas, would we like to see more plans for that before we make a determination?
I feel like we have to.
Okay. All right. So where's the applicant? Oh, there you are. Sorry. If you don't mind, we would like to defer this case and give you time to come back with more fleshed out information about what's going on in those amenity areas.
Well, I could state that. I mean, I sent those in this week to the Urban Design Center. They just didn't make it into the presentation. Okay. But anyway, in this area here, it's we're proposing to plant. You got street trees all along the street corridor, of course, but in this area here, we're planting another tree. There's a large grade change between the right-of-way of Queen Pierrette down to the
So it's falling away.
easement. Yeah, It's going down at about anywhere from 10 to 15 feet. So there's not a lot of really room in there to put any type of benching or any type of seating, but we did add some landscaping.
Okay.
In this area here, we have shrubs that are being proposed along this side of the amenity area. And again, we're matching it from the back of this lot to, there's a mail kiosk right here adjacent to the parking lot. In that area there, we have shrubs as well that basically mirror this side. And again, in all this area here, you have tree conservation. This whole area in here is wooded. We're preserving that other than trying to carve out a little space for a dog park to add to amenity. So we're just that's just tree save.
Do you have any ability to do a little bit of buffer plantings in that amenity area just to address some of the concerns with visibility from existing properties onto this within that area?
I mean, we can add some shrubs or things, some understory trees or shrubs, but
Excuse me, we don't need any shrubs.
well,
If you would like to speak, you need to come up.
Thank you.
this you can see right here. This is an aerial.
Yes.
You can see this wood line.
Yep.
Right here.
Yeah.
So this again, tree conservation area, that met all the basal requirements.
Yep.
This area here did not meet basal requirements, but that's where we thought we would be the best site to do a dog park of some kind for the residents there. So, I mean, if we're allowed to put some shrubs back here or some understory trees, I'm not opposed to that. Okay. But, these are all fairly large trees. So, I mean, I don't want to go clear trees just to plant a buffer.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
With this being a amenity area so close to a major road, would you have the capacity, and again, this is outside of our scope, but just hearing public comment, fencing, any kind of divisional between the two areas?
I'll bring that up to the developer and say that as a request for both the residents and coming from you as the Appearance Commission.
Please, thank you. When you speak of shrubs and such, do you have the species that you're going to be using? Are they going to be flowering of any sorts? Are they evergreen? What is that going to consist of?
I would propose evergreen. That way it's more
And this is where I have concern because the proposal is not the actual.
Mhm.
So what you sent to the UDC, did it have exact information?
Not on providing any buffering, no.
Or even along the street edge.
The street edge amenity. Mm-hmm.
We're talking about build too, right?
What? We're talking about build too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Well, if we have to justify an amenity space for offset, we got to make sure it's good.
I'm just.
We've
You're
had
good.
a couple of these. We've had a couple of these come up, very very similar to these in the last 2 years. I think one off Creedmoor Road, one out Capitol Boulevard or somewhere. Very similar, and yeah, in each case they did have a planting plan showing and very specific, this is the size of the park, dog park, and those kind of things. And I think that's kind of what we're getting at here, is that they're asking for forgiveness for some of those, and we kind of need to see what that's going to be more than just we're thinking about something like a dog park here.
I agree. I mean, I think ultimately there's provision that talks about plantings in a formal rhythm or something that extends the street edge. So the question really is in these shrubs, like what is it? What are we talking about? And how does it impact, screening the parking lot? How does it impact, the experience of that space?
Yeah, this is a case where I think it's human nature that if you don't have the information, you're going to fill in the
And you don't
blank
know-
with the worst case scenario.
Right.
So I think it may be just more about clarity and understanding the quality of what you're intending. And that's both internal to the commission and I think external to the community.
Absolutely.
It may be perfectly fine. It's just understanding it as part of.
Oh, sure. I mean, we do have detailed planning by a landscape architect for the site that shows the plantings in these amenity areas. So we'll just include those next time.
Please do.
Yeah, that's independent of really the decision making. I just think as feedback,
Across the
for the next time we see you, it's just better to have more information
Agreed.
than not.
So we'll defer the case, and what will happen basically at our next meeting, which will be 2 weeks from now, I think. Yes, 2 weeks from now.
The 19th of March,
They'll come back in
4:30. We would not do another mailing, but it will be posted on the website, but.
So,
Brandy, just one quick question. Have we often approved an amenity with a dog park as a public amenity? Is that, just thinking of how they program this space out, just wondering if that's.
I think we've seen at least a couple of them in the past that have included dog parks.
Included, but not as them, okay.
Right, and I think in this case, it's a piece of the amenity area. It's not the only, so, I think it probably is like the other ones we've seen.
Okay.
Historically. So, do I hear a motion to defer?
Motion to defer.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So I just formally say, just make sure the applicant has guidance on what you want to see
Yeah.
in terms of that. So if you could summarize that'd be.
Okay, so I think just in summary, thank you for that, Carter. Ultimately, we need to see your landscape planting plan and the full plans for that amenity area, just so we understand what we're looking at.
And I think your comments to me made a lot of sense. In the absence of where a building should be,
The formal rhythm of plantings.
how is it being treated?
Yeah, yeah. All right. All right. All right.
This one? Okie dokie. So this is AAD 820-6201 Litchford Road. This is another build-to alternate. So I'm going to skip over the definition intent. I will note, however, that C1, the corner lot requirement, does apply here. So just pay attention to that. So the applicant here is proposing to develop an 82-unit affordable housing apartment development that consists of 3 buildings within a neighborhood mixed-use 3-story conditional use district. The apartment buildings in NX districts have the following build-to requirements: primary streets. So I will say here that both Litchford and Dixie Forest are primary streets here. So the build-to is 10 to 55 feet with a 70% building width requirement. So since both streets have been designated primary, that will be the standard here. The applicant is proposing an alternate to the 70% building width requirement on Dixie Forest Road. They are meeting it on Litchford Road. Instead of meeting that on Dixie Forest Road, they are proposing to occupy approximately 48.7% of the lot with buildings, with building 300, and 34.6% of the lot width with open amenity area, which is split among 3 areas. And so total, this comes to about 83% of the lot width. And again, the requirement is 70%, and so that is what's proposed here.
Does anybody have any questions for Charles?
I have to recuse myself from this one too.
All right, will the applicant please step forward? Yep.
Yep. Yep. So the PDF is open. It's just
What do we have?
over here.
Okay, so my name's Chandler Turner. I'm with McAdams. We represent the company or the project here. So this is Abington Square. It's at the intersection of Dixie Forest Road and Litchford in North Raleigh, kind of close to Millbrook High School. So today we'll talk just a very brief project summary. We've already kind of gone over the administrative alternate findings, really get into the hardships that are posed on this project and our proposed alternate.
May I interrupt?
So this is an 82 unit
Can I
affordable
interrupt you,
housing
please?
project.
I'm sorry. Make sure when you are working through your presentation, hardships are not something that we're considering. So talk to us about how you're, from a design standpoint, enhancing
Right,
what's
it's-
going there.
just paints the picture.
So don't,
Yeah.
I mean, a hardship, we have to know about it, but it doesn't impact what
Sure,
we
sure.
decide. So just.
Understood.
Okay.
Okay. So it's an affordable housing project. Both of the roads that are adjacent to our site are NCDOT roads, which will come into play later. And we are providing a pretty substantial amount of outdoor amenities area on this project. As mentioned earlier, our building's located in a NX3 CU zoning. The build twos are 10 to 55. That's a 70% requirement along the frontage. Dixie Forest and Litchford Road, both are determined to be our primary streets, so that's why that 70% comes in. And then for build to zones, you have to have a building within your 30 by 30 foot corner lot. So these are some of the regulations that we talked about earlier. We're trying to locate the building as close to the street as possible and while maintaining some building articulation. We're conforming to the comprehensive plans by providing a different variety of housing. You know, affordable housing is really high on the list nowadays. And then providing open space and new developments, and again, providing affordable housing. And then number 5, in our areas that we are not meeting our build to, we're proposing to add an outdoor amenity area space to fill in that gap. Some of the hardships, and I know that's not important not to hit home to, but this site along Dixie Forest is part of City of Raleigh's transportation improvement plan, and so we're not doing any improvements with this, but because of that, we have to provide a 20-foot slope easement, and then because you can't put street trees in the DOT right away close to the travel lanes, we have to provide a 15-foot C2 street yard, and then a 10-foot building setback off of that C2 street yard. You really have 45 feet that you can't put a building in. So. And then that kind of compounds to your corner build too, where you get to a point where you can't even put the building into it. So, all right, so our proposed alternate is to fill the gaps in space with the proposed outdoor amenity with something like gazebo structures, trellis with benches, understory trees, shrubs, bushes, small plants, and walking trail connections to really activate the space. And over here is kind of your, just a small snippet, and I'll bring up the bigger picture later. And so here's our frontage build-to Calyx, and as you can see, as mentioned earlier, without the amenity space calculated, we're only at 54%, which is below our 70. But with the outdoor amenity included, we're above our 70% threshold. And as well as that, and you'll see on this picture, our site plan. Okay. The 30 by 30 build to corner, this line right here that's going there, that's the build to line off of that C2 yard that we were talking about, where you can't put a building inside of it. But our amenity space is activating what portion of that build to that we can. And so And then again, here's that blow up of the amenity space. That's really all we have. If you guys have any questions, I'd love to answer them. So.
Thanks. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? All right, we'll call you back up.
Thank you.
If we need you. Is anybody here from the public to speak? So remember to please state your name and address.
My name is David Lawson. I live at 6301 Johnsdale Road, which borders the far back corner of the property, right along where it meets the school property. My main concern is the grading of the property. As we have the back of the property is known for flooding. Actually, I have pictures from the most recent rainstorm that flooded the back of my property, along with the back of this property. So my main concern is if they do grade the property, basically will be, the school already has a berm that creates part of the issue. And if there is a grade on the property, then that would cause an issue with flooding retention in my property. So that's my main concern.
I noticed a BMP in one of the sketches that was a background. I don't know if the applicant can speak just from a...
I did see a stormwater system. I just want to make sure it's able to handle that type of, yeah.
Can you just explain that for us?
What I could hear, you're back here somewhere?
I'm here.
Okay, so this is a below grade facility. It'll just be greenscape. There's also, and Michael, if you want to come and talk about the buffers that are the protective yards that are required. There's also a fence. I know that you want to. Yeah, certainly.
And just make sure you frame it from a flooding standpoint, not so much buffers, because his concern is flooding.
Sure, I can try and do that.
'Cause
Michael Van Pran, 129 Beasley Avenue.
Yeah.
So just big picture, we're required by City of Raleigh to not increase stormwater runoff whatsoever after post-development. And so certainly we do have some neighborhood transition buffers that are also shown. It's a buffer between a residential use and a mixed-use property such as this. And of course, plant material and other vegetation helps decrease stormwater runoff as well. But so all that underground facility shouldn't and won't impact your stormwater discharge onto your property. It all discharges to the southwest right now, and that's where we're actually pushing water to. So it should, in theory, make it a little bit better, in fact, but that would be the intent from a stormwater perspective. And we can certainly, we have those plans, and we can certainly go more into depth in all that offline, definitely.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, anybody else from the public? Okay, we'll table it for discussion. All right. I mean, I think purely from a build-to standpoint, where we substitute building in a certain area with an amenity space, I think this meets that, that reading of the code.
I think one of the intents too of maintaining the established street edge, there's not really one in this area.
Right.
So we're not really
negatively impacting it,
the
right?
character, right.
Any other thoughts?
I agree with that, and I think, you know, here again, we see an example of kind of a DOT city kind of who wins the battle kind of thing, and typically DOT. But I think, I think, you know, they're kind of hemmed in, so I think they've done a good job within those guidelines. So.
My only question, Carter, is can we, and this is for the group and for Carter, should we condition it that the amenity area that gets installed looks something like what's proposed? Is that clear enough for staff to be able to interpret?
I would be very specific. You know, if there's a certain number of benches, it needs to be something that our review staff can actually point to and say it's there.
We could also measure that lawn area and figure out how many square feet it is, and then put that into a condition and say if you provide this amount of, you know, lawn or other amenity area.
I mean, I think ultimately my only concern is, like, I like the sketch. I think it's a nice space. I just want to make sure that when it gets built, that's it's of that same quality. And I know we're reviewing it probably.
Yeah. I think they just like to have measurable conditions
Yeah.
to the extent that you guys can provide them.
So is that something that if we put a condition to say it's equal to here, that you could help us substantiate that and get it to the applicant afterwards, or include it in the condition? Because I don't think we can right now measure it, right?
So we can, I think we could measure it. I don't know if we can measure that and then sort of retroactively make that a condition.
Yeah.
That might be the hard part. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's kind of stretching it.
Okay.
Well, and that's,
We're going to just take it, the plan. That's right.
They should, right? I mean, we have to rely on.
Can we use this as an exhibit?
Yeah.
It could be, I mean, I think we've used that in the past to say, but it's got to be something that, you know, like, this looks great, you know, the site review staff can be like, yeah, it looks great, but, you know, what am I looking at?
Yeah, what is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Is
you know-
it, do I have to have an oval with a sidewalk that's 6 feet wide? You
I
know?
mean, I think.
Is the walking trail a gravel or is it concrete? I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of things.
and not to be the amenity space police, but I'd love
amenity
to know more
area and
details
zone.
about the species and the hardscape, and it's another one that doesn't have full detail for me.
Yeah, I'm still, I think in general, though,
It looks nice.
even after I asked the question, I think ultimately it's still an amenity area in the zone, and as long as we put a condition on it that says it needs to match, then hopefully the applicant will make it be similar and leave it at that.
Approval with conditions, what you're considering.
Yeah. But I mean, it's up to whatever, I mean, if we just want to approve it without conditions and take that at face value, I'm okay to do that too.
You know, this case and the one prior, I think it's important to have folks that are using this amenity space as the offset for their build to come with full, I mean, over-inform us. And I don't know if we can push back from the staff standpoint before they get here to encourage that to come along with the presentation.
Okay, so.
We could also list out the text as a simple, you know, everything that's stated on this plan.
Yeah.
And that, yeah,
I
that's.
think that's.
Because there is more
exactly.
detail here than prior, but.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All
But I
right.
agree with you that.
My only concern is that sometimes we see things and they don't get built that way.
Right.
So that's all.
That would be my concern as well.
Mm-hmm. And we saw that, yeah, oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go through and let's go through the findings, and then when we get to the motion, we can talk about that. So the approved alternate meets the intent of the build-to regulations, and I think it does. The approved alternate conforms with the comp plan and adopted city plans, so help me substantiate it.
Policy LU 5.1, I think is.
And if the amenity space is implemented, policy UD 4.1, public gathering spaces. So that will be it. Anything else? Okay. The approved alternate does not substantially negatively alter the character-defining street wall or establish a build-to pattern that is not harmonious with the existing built context. And I think we feel like
There is not a pre-existing.
it is creating that for us. The change in percentage of building that occupies the build-to area or increased setback does not negatively impact pedestrian access, comfort, or safety.
Sure.
And I think it's fine, yep. And then site area that would have otherwise been occupied by buildings is converted to an outdoor amenity area. All right, so who would like to make a motion?
Motion to approve with condition. Condition.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, it's all right. Condition being that what we see by way of, I like the concept of an exhibit that we've received today. The finished product is as good or better than what we've received today.
Would you allow me to amend that, maybe?
Absolutely.
I'll pitch it, and you tell me if it's
All
okay.
right.
The items that are noted on the plan are included in the final design.
Perfect.
Are there any seconds?
Second.
All right. All in favor? Aye. All right. All right, so we're moving on to case AAD 9-20, 7921 ACC Boulevard. We see so many build-to cases.
Trying to keep
We
this
see
thing
so
moving
many of
along, I
them.
guess.
So the applicant in this case is seeking an alternate for transparency. The applicant is proposing an addition to an existing orthopedic surgical center zoned commercial, mixed use, 7 stories, parking limited frontage, conditional use on a 2.32 acre site. Because of the HIPAA privacy rules requiring that patient rooms cannot have transparent windows, the existing building uses only spandrel glass. The applicant proposes to continue the same pattern of spandrel glass windows across the new facade to maintain the visual rhythm and lend visual interest to the facade. The addition on the eastern portion of the building will have transparent glass. The current proposal for the addition provides 36% total glazing, which includes both spandrel and transparent glass, between 0 feet and 12 feet, with 52.5% of that glazing falling between 3 feet and 8 feet on the building additions. Of the provided glazing, 58.8% is spandrel glass and 41.2% is transparent. Where transparent glass is used, it shall have a transparency greater than 80% and an external reflectance of less than 15%. So let me know if you have any questions. I know it's a little confusing with the different proportions of spandrel versus transparent.
Does anybody have any questions for Lee?
What is the total of transparent glass again?
The total percentage of transparent is, so the total glazing is 36%, and then of that, about half is transparent.
And how much is required?
So about 14% of the total facade is transparent. Yeah, the rest is spandrel.
And how much is required? 30.
In this case, 50% is required.
Lee, can you speak to?
33% is required, I'm sorry.
Can you speak to? I mean, this is an addition, so I hope this addition matches what's there. How does it match up with what's existing? As far as percentage-wise, I mean, I see there's a lot more windows in the addition than there is even.
Yes, it exceeds the amount of glazing that's present on the existing portion. In the elevation, you have that grayer portion, the slightly less saturated portion of the existing. The applicant has offered that the very top portion of those windows can be transparent if the commission would prefer to see that. And that is still in accordance with HIPAA, but staff has recommended to him that he present it as all spandrel so that it matches the existing.
I think that's the idea that we said that if you want to continue that, the original portion of the building was done under the previous zoning code, so the transparency requirements weren't there like they are now.
Well, I'm just asking from the perspective. I just hope they have a building that looks decent and matches. So, do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. All right, take it away.
Ben Wittenberg with Goodwin Mosquewood Architects out of Nashville, Tennessee, the architect for Triangle Orthopedic Surgery. And I appreciate Lee and Mr. Pettibone's.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Excuse me.
Yeah, that's okay.
I appreciate Mrs. Stevens and Mr. Pettibone's assistance on getting this project here very much. Basically, your questions address already what I was going to say. The grayed out portion in the center is the existing building. We've attempted to replicate the architectural features of that and increase the amount of glazing, but due to privacy requirements of the facility, we're unable to achieve the percentages of transparency that are requested. The plan left-hand side is waiting room. That's all completely transparent, and the existing building as well is transparent to the main entry door. The rest of the existing building is all spandrel glass. The door's transparent. The other 3 windows you see on the existing building are transparent or spandrel glazing, and then currently we're proposing all of the glazing on the right-hand side be spandrel glazing.
Does anybody have any questions for the applicant?
Can we see the plan a little larger so we can understand it? Can we see a little better on the screen, or can we blow it?
You tell me. Can I just squeeze it? Nope.
You have to use the mouse here and click on
So I went the wrong direction. The portion of the addition that the elevation you were seeing before is this elevation. The addition is here, and this is lobby addition, all transparent glazing. This is patient rooms, all spandrel glazing. And of course, existing is this portion.
I'd prefer not to see your patients, so I'm generally okay with what's going on here.
All right, any more questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak about this? No? All right, so I'll table it, and I would concur that given what the existing facility looks like, what the existing glazing is, that I'm less inclined to worry about it being transparent at the top or not.
It's pretty far back from the road.
Yeah.
So it is. I see a big parking lot in front of it. If there were not an existing building there, I'd potentially
It would be at the
not
front.
allow HIPAA to, generate how we've judged architecture, but I think given the context is,
And I appreciate the opportunity that you volunteered to make that top bit transparent. But again, as staff recommended, the consistency is going to be a better visual.
All right, let's go through the findings. The approved alternate meets the intent of the transparency requirements, and I think it does. Everybody good with that? So the articulation of the glazing offsets the lack of transparency and its location on the site. The approved alternate conforms with the comprehensive plan and adopted city plans. Maybe, go ahead.
UD 1.3.
1.4,
1.3 and 1.4.
maintaining facade lines. I feel like it's
LU 5.1, reinforcing urban pattern.
All right. And the street-facing building facade utilizes other architectural treatments to create visual interest to offset the reduction in transparency, which I think it does. All right, so does anybody want to make a motion?
motion to approve.
Second. Microphone.
Oh.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Gotta get in the habit of talking in the mic. I get recorded. All right, so next up is case AAD 10-20 for 5600 Hillsborough Street.
Okay, this is a request for an alternate to UDO section 7.17 vehicle parking lot landscaping. The intent of the vehicle parking lot landscaping requirements is to minimize the visual impact of large areas of vehicular parking as viewed from the public right-of-way and dissipate the effects of the urban heat island. A well-designed parking lot utilizes landscaped island and clear delineations to break the parking lot into smaller segments. And finally, tree and shrub planting should not interfere with the pedestrian circulation on the site. So we're going to skip to part F here, tree coverage. Each interior island and terminal interior island must include at least one shade tree, and in no case shall there be less than one shade tree for every 2,000 square feet of parking area, except in an urban frontage or TOD overlay where there shall be no less than one shade tree for every 4,000 square feet of parking area. Number 2 doesn't apply here. The applicant is proposing to redevelop a vacant portion of a 3.33 acre site zoned industrial mixed use, 3 stories, urban limited frontage. The proposed building is a 5,800 square foot addition to an existing approximately 31,000 square foot building. Per UDO section 7.17 F1, each interior island and terminal interior island must include at least one shade tree. The applicant is requesting an alternate to the island shade tree requirement for 3 of the interior islands, citing underground gas easements. The proposed alternate is to plant 3 shade trees in landscaped areas closest to those 3 internal islands within the easement. Additionally, the applicant proposes to plant shrubs in the interior islands where the easement precludes shade tree planting. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Charles?
Is there a reason why staff can't solve this?
Not yet.
Okay.
No.
All right. Any questions? Nope. All right. Anybody from the public to speak about this? No. All right. Applicant, please come forward. I got that out of order. Sorry.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
Dan Greenberg from Kimley Horn. So, as mentioned, we are building in addition to the XL Soccer existing building. We are proposing a parking lot to City of Raleigh standards, and as mentioned again, the requirement by UDO is to plant a canopy tree in every terminal island or interior island. Shown here in gray in the area here is the area that's encumbered by utility easements overhead and underground based on the original historic alignment of Hillsborough Street. So it does bisect the parking lot. We have planted canopy trees in every island that we can, and in a couple of cases where we have overhead easements but not underground, we have gone to understory trees. So we have 3 islands where we're not able to plant because of the underground easements. We have one here, and one here. The closest available planting area for these 3 trees is across the aisle, right over here, approximately 60 to 70 feet away in these 2 cases. This one has to go a little further, about 100 feet over in this area right here. To keep it brief, I'll hold for questions.
Anybody have any questions?
Is there any way to do like fake trees? Like you know how they have those trees? Is there any way to do real questions? So that way you don't have to worry about the roots. Can you do that? Or no?
We don't.
Not sure how the city would feel about that.
Cell tower tree?
No. All right. So we'll table it. If we have any questions, we'll call you back.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. And there's already nobody from the public. I got that out of order. So just from first pass, I think the trees and the location proposed actually are more useful for everyone. And I think it's at least as equal to what the code would require. All right. Let's go fast. All right, here we go. The approved alternate meets the intent of the vehicle parking lot requirements. I think it does. The approved administrative alternate conforms with the comprehensive plan and adopted city plans. Policy UD 3.9 parking lot design, policy T 6.8 parking lot design.
UD 5.1 contextual design.
Excellent. The approved alternate is considered equal to or better than the standard. I think yes. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Maybe that's a record.
That's a record. You know what, Dan, you were fast and last. You did great. Thank you.
All right. All right. Do we need to approve minutes?